Hey, it's Sarah, and I want to tell you a little bit about how I became bilingual and why I speak Spanish fluently as a non-native speaker of Spanish. So I want to start going all the way back to when I became interested in languages, and it started when I became aware that my grandmother spoke fluent French. And she learned French not from as a heritage speaker, so I don't have any French in my bloodline, and neither did she, but she had learned French in college and possibly earlier, I really don't know, but I definitely know in college that she learned French, and she was very good at speaking French to the point that she even worked in the UN, and she was a secretary. Now this was very long ago. This was when it was the League of Nations. She had just graduated from UW-Madison in Wisconsin, and she worked for a Russian guy who only spoke Russian and French, and of course she spoke English and French, and she did his secretarial work. So I knew about that story. She would speak fluent French, and she'd speak French in front of us. She would put on French records, and so it's so powerful as a child to be exposed to a parent or a grandparent or a loved one who speaks a language fluently that's not your own. And I thought, I'm gonna learn French. I want to learn French just like Grandma. And so, the United States education system, you don't get an opportunity to really learn a language until middle school. So in 8th grade, I had the opportunity to either choose Spanish or German. Now, the French instruction started in 9th grade, but I knew I wanted to learn a language, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to take Spanish. I was frustrated I couldn't take French. I felt like German, even though I actually have German blood in me, it didn't appeal. I decided to enroll in Spanish, and I thought, okay, well in 9th grade, I'll just switch over. I'll just learn French. I'll stop learning Spanish. But that 8th grade year, I really fell in love with Spanish. I had a great teacher, but I also really I feel like Spanish is an easy language to learn compared to, let's say, French, because I ended up actually taking French in college. I also took Chinese in college too. I feel like French is just kind of tough. It's tough in a lot of ways. So for me, Spanish was much easier. The spelling is all phonetic. The way you pronounce everything is just the way it looks. So it helped me kind of really just grasp Spanish quickly. And I was excited about Spanish. I was excited about speaking it, learning it. I loved putting those pieces together of the grammar, which is why I ultimately became a speech pathologist. I love patterns and decoding and trying to get to the bottom of things, and that's why I love grammar and syntax so much. So I started Spanish in 8th grade, and then I just continued. It sounded like I said discontinued. I didn't discontinue. I kept going and going. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I'd taken 5 years, and I took a test that gave me extra credits when I started college. So when I started college, I had a boatload, the maximum amount of foreign language credits that you could get. So it put me into a very high level Spanish class. That was great because I loved speaking Spanish. I loved learning about the language and the culture. And at UW-Madison, where I got my undergrad, I just jumped right into, I think it was like Spanish 301 or something. It was like advanced grammar. I loved it. Now, I want to back up and say I was very shy about speaking Spanish because I didn't want to make a mistake. And I know that Spanish language instruction has evolved a lot since when I was in high school, which was in the early 90s. And now it really focuses on taking risks and using more conversation. But back in my day, it was all about grammar, getting it right. And so sometimes when I'm speaking Spanish, I get really worried about making an error. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that it's less important to worry about making an error and more important to take risks. And I think that's actually applicable to pretty much everything in life. It's so important to take risks. You don't want to just keep doing the same thing. You won't learn. So I went ahead and majored in Spanish. It was actually pretty easy since I'd already come in with all those credits, and it was a passion of mine. So I took 4 years of Spanish, and then I started working for Kraft Foods. So I really didn't get a chance to use my Spanish for a while there while I was working in corporate America. I did try to apply for jobs within the company to see if they could maybe use my skills in Spanish, but that never panned out. So when I went back to graduate school and graduated from Northwestern with my master's in speech therapy, I asked to work in a large urban district, Chicago Public Schools, and I was put in schools where everybody spoke Spanish. So it felt very much like immersion because you would go into school, everybody would speak Spanish. The secretary was speaking Spanish, all the parents were speaking Spanish. I feel like the schools I worked at, definitely the one that I was in for 4 years was 98% Latino. So all the teachers, most of the teachers spoke Spanish, and those were the kids I worked with and the teachers I interacted with. So it taught me so much, and by taking risks, I was able to get to a level of fluency right now where I pretty much can understand virtually anything in Spanish. And so it's great for when I'm out in the community, I can understand, and because where I live, there are Spanish speakers. There's all different kinds of speakers. There's a ton of Russians in the suburb I'm in Chicago. So yeah, it feels like a magical power because I can always pick up on things. Now, answering sometimes can be a little challenging for me. Not that I don't know, because I've studied so much Spanish, I've spoken so much Spanish for so many years that it's really second nature, but yes, I still do make errors. And part of that is because I learned Spanish after my critical language period. So like right around age 7 or 8, the brain loses a little bit of its plasticity related to language learning. So it is what it is. I can be pretty darn fluent. I certainly know Spanish phonetics because I took a class in that all the way back in undergrad. So I understand how to do speech sound production. So I sound pretty good. Woo! Fly. I sound pretty good in Spanish, and I think that's because of just understanding Spanish phonetics and speech therapy tricks that I know. But sometimes I make little grammatical errors. So that is what it is. But anyway, Spanish is my passion. I've always loved speaking Spanish, and I totally encourage everybody, no matter what age you are, to learn another language. I feel like it's so good for your brain to try to piece together new languages. And actually, even now that I'm 40 and I speak Spanish and I speak English, I've decided to pick up Chinese again. And I actually feel like it's even more straightforward than learning French. And that's because it's very rule-based, and once you start learning some of the patterns, it makes sense. There's grammar and syntax, makes perfect sense, and it's actually there's less helping verbs. You just put it out there as one verb. There's less conjugations, which I really like too. But anyway, I think I'm getting on a tangent, but I love Spanish. That is the bottom line. And I've been interested in languages since I was very young, hearing my grandmother speak French. So that is all. I hope you're having an awesome week, and I'll see you next time.